Well, I may not have a sign of victory for those who believe in freedom, but I at least have some catharsis. Here's a story from Timcast.com. Democratic National Committee tells unvaccinated employees they face termination. Employees of the DNC are expected to return to in-person work on January 3rd, 2022. I find that really funny because of all of the people who work anywhere, you wouldn't expect to find people who aren't vaccinated working for the DNC, but apparently there are. And now those people who have given their work towards empowering the DNC are going to lose their jobs. Now, look, I don't want to revel in anybody losing their job. I don't like the DNC. I don't like the RNC for that matter. But these are the people who vote for this stuff. They support this stuff. They actively work for the DNC to support this. And now they're coming to them saying, well, you're going to lose your job now unless you fall in line. And they're like, but I don't want to fall in line. Oh, congratulations on what you asked for. You get what you wish for, you know?
I'm sorry, good comrade. You're going to have to take this one for the team.
I'll be honest.
Step back. I'm sorry.
If Trump had won the election, we'd be in the same situation right now. He was just as authoritative and ignorant.
How?
He rushed that vaccine out. He was going to do it anyway.
How is that authoritative?
Because they're letting the CDC run the show right now. And he was letting Fauci run the show when he was in office. So I don't blame the Democrats. It's just the idiocy of authoritarianism and ignorant authoritarianism.
That's true. Trump let Fauci do all this stuff. Trump was on board with 15 days to slow the spread. That was the Trump plan. And then he could have, he did try coming out a few months later being like, we should reopen. And here's my plan, but I don't have the authority to mandate the states to do this. The states were doing it, not the federal government. Well, now Joe Biden is doing it. So at the very least, I can say this. Trump did let Fauci run afoul and run amok. Joe Biden is still worse. But yeah, if Trump was going to have Fauci staying in there and now he's coming out like, I should have fired the guy. Yeah, you should have fired a lot of people, but he didn't. I don't think it'd be the same. I don't think there'd be mandates. The mandates would be at the state level, but not the federal level. Trump would not come out and say, we are going to require all people are mandated to do this.
Yeah, you're right. I don't want to make an assumption like that.
I will say, though, I'm willing to bet if Trump did, you'd have a large portion of Trump supporters being like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Trump is doing the right thing by mandating this.
Well, it's very interesting to see a lot of very prominent blue checkmark individuals who previously said that they would never take the Trump scene, the Trump vaccine, who are now saying you must take this vaccine and it's mandatory when Trump was the one who rushed emergency authorization for it. He's the one that literally on national television wanted the vaccine to be called the Trump scene. And now he's making some very interesting statements. I mean, he was a big pusher of this. He was a big proponent of this, and this needs to be acknowledged. A lot of people are very distrustful of him because of this, but now he's making some very interesting statements, and I don't know if he's just trying to play up to the popular base if he really means this, because he was a full-on vaccine supporter, but now he's saying that the third booster shot is about money and not about health. This is not me saying it. This is Donald Trump saying what he said recently about the booster shots that people are being mandated, that now 2 million people in Israel have lost their vaccine status because they didn't take the third shot.
I think Trump's wrong, though. I don't think the third booster shot is about money. I think all of it is about money. I do think, however, you look at the expose from Project Veritas. What do we learn from these 3 scientists at Pfizer? They actually think the vaccine is safe and effective and works. However, they do add, if you've already had COVID, your natural immunity is probably better. Well, there you go. The question then becomes, if we're going to have that conversation, is it get COVID to avoid COVID? Because that doesn't quite make sense. But if you did accidentally already get it, then you should be left alone. Outside of all that, I think we're falling into a trap on the mandates in general. We shouldn't be talking about. There should be no mandates, no papers, please, none of that. Yeah. We got to be careful about that.
I mean, there's some studies showing that people with natural immunity could have immunity for the rest of their lives. That's a lot better than the waning immunity for 5 to 6 months comparatively to the vaccine, which, again, these Pfizer scientists are openly admitting, but we should be having a national conversation about this, and we're not.
They didn't say it was waning. They just said natural immunity was potentially better.
Right. Yeah.
This is tough stuff, man. I read a really great article from Yahoo that basically said, here's a study from Cleveland. I think it was a Cleveland clinic and like University of Washington or something, as well as an Israeli study, saying that natural immunity is particularly effective. However, they did mention one smaller study, which, take it into consideration, from, I can't remember where this one was from, but it said that natural immunity didn't have any, they didn't see a discernible difference between that and the vaccine. So I'll put it this way. Look, we shouldn't be we're falling into that trap. I don't want to fall into that trap. I don't want to sit here and have a conversation about, waning this or natural immunity that. No mandates. None. You shouldn't have to show your papers to enter a building. I don't care what for. Because what's going to happen is if we keep trying to reframe it in this way, and that's where the debate's being pulled, probably on purpose, then we end up with social credit systems either way. That path leads to two doors: social credit system with exemptions and social credit system. Yeah. How about we just say no?
I think the social credit system is going to be put in through an economic crash, but I could save that conversation for a little bit later. But another thing to highlight about this Project Veritas video is they have Chris Karr, a Pfizer senior associate scientist, saying, quote, "I work for an evil corporation. Our organization is run on COVID money." That's not me saying that. That's Chris Karr, Pfizer senior associate scientist. So, I mean, Project Veritas is releasing a lot of these videos.
But let's not get pulled into that. Yeah. Like, I think this is really important to recognize the motives of a major corporation, especially when you have, government mandates. There's a major profit motive in there. But again, that's why the conversation should always be pulled away from that and straight into, hey, no mandates. None.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got to wonder, though, is Pfizer incentivizing the government to push the vaccine? I remember when they're like, who's going to get the contract? And you're like, oh, the contract, right? Is that what this is? Well, hey, Pfizer got the contract, and so did Moderna. They got a contract, too.
Well, there's been
contract for... Like, it's that...
Yeah. It's very interesting to see a lot of attacks on Johnson & Johnson, and you don't see the same kind of level of scrutiny against Moderna and Pfizer.
That's weird.
And that is very weird to see because, Johnson & Johnson is not an mRNA vaccine.
Right.
It's a different one.
It's a adenovirus DNA vaccine, I think
it's
called.
Yeah,
just one shot. Yeah.
So, why can't we have a real discussion about one corporation but not another one?
From what I know about these older vaccines, they provoke a natural immune response. That's the point. You give a little bit in your body's like, whoa, the virus is here. Let's create a real immune response. Then you have natural immunity. The RNA ones, I think, however,
it's the same.
Are you sure? Because I think they only protect against one of the spike proteins or a couple of spike proteins on the outer layer of the vaccine.
There's like the attenuated virus vaccine, I think it's called, where they give you either like weakened, dead, or just a small amount of live vaccine. I think the George Washington smallpox inoculations, which is a very small amount they would prick you with so that your body would defeat it and then build antibodies. And then what mRNA does is it programs some cells to produce spike proteins, which then get attacked. And so in the Veritas video, the Pfizer scientist is saying that natural immunity has antibodies to multiple parts of the virus, whereas the vaccine is just the spike protein. Still, look, it's interesting to see. What I get out of the Veritas stuff is that you have these scientists who are straight up saying that it's money, that natural immunity is good and it's money. But again, we need to just be focused on the mandates. And I'm going to keep pulling it back because the end result of that conversation will always be a social credit system.
It's not even mandates. It's basic human rights, Tim.
Yes, I get it, man. But you guys keep trying to pull the conversation back into we should have an argument about how we should support the mandates.
No, not at all.
No, listen,
absolutely not.
When the conversation is natural immunity, you're basically saying exceptions to that to mandates. James Lindsay has a tweet where he said, eventually, when the mandates start failing, when they're not working, the conversation will shift to some kind of exemption, some reasonable alternative that still has mandates. We cannot have a conversation consistently just going back into the same thing. It's frustrating because it's such an easy and obvious trap. We get it. They make vaccines. Talk to your doctor. Don't support the policy of authoritarians, period. I don't care to talk about the rest of the stuff because it's the same trick. You get everybody watching the show telling their friends, look, with respect to James O'Keefe, I think it's a big story that shows you what these people think at this company. But we got to be careful about a conversation that says people who have natural immunity should be allowed exemptions in the vaccine mandates. No. No, show me your papers, please, period. That's my hard line.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's no reason that you need a permission slip for the government to go to the supermarket or to get a haircut. That's an absolutely ridiculous, huge step by government that they're totally abusing in an absolutely non-scientific way, in a way that absolutely doesn't justify it. And there's elements of this official story that people use to kind of back this up. And I think that's why some people chip away at the official narrative. But I think the people who chip away at the official narrative aren't saying that the mandates are good. I think the mandates are absolutely inhuman. I think the government literally creating new hoops every 6 months saying you need to do this in order to comply. I mean, Israelis...
It's the big ask.
Yeah, Israelis are getting a huge, rude awakening.
This is the big ask.
Yeah.
Where they say everyone's mandated a vaccine plus boosters. Okay, well, you can also do negative testing and antibody testing. It's like, no, I'm not big asking. Yeah. I'm not playing that game. None of this. They have implemented so many changes over COVID. They call it the new normal that have not been reversed. And that's what we need to be talking about. They use the vaccine because they know regular people typically trust their doctors. Sometimes people have bad doctors. They know regular people support vaccination. And that is the attack vector, because then you can get regular people, maybe some of these parents, maybe some of these people questioning their bank account, to hear a story where they say a group of people are saying vaccine bad and they don't want to get it. And they're like, that's weird. Vaccines are typically good. The narrative needs to be, no. Vaccine's fine. You go to your doctor, you figure out your own health decisions. Mandate by government authority. Show me your papers. Bad.
This is bringing me to Jacobson versus Massachusetts, 1905 Supreme Court case where a guy did not want to get the smallpox vaccine because of his religious rights, and the government eventually went to the Supreme Court. They decided you have to get the vaccine. Smallpox is too dangerous. So now we're in a similar situation. Is COVID as dangerous as smallpox? Is it that kind of danger? That's the question.
No, I don't think it is. No. I understand the precedent in that. I think the question is, when do we allow the government to mandate you show your papers? You want to talk about saying people need to be vaccinated to go to school? I've had that conversation. Look, over a long period of time, there was legislation, scientific studies, long-term health effects were reported, and we said, here's what we think about this vaccine. It's good. Okay, we hereby vote for a representative. Representatives all kind of agree. We're all in favor of this. Okay, we're going to require vaccinations at schools, and we all shake hands and move on with our lives. This is something else. This is in New York City. If you want to go to a restaurant, you need an ID. You need an up-to-date passport card. This isn't about the precedent of vaccines. That's what keeps happening. Every time the conversation is being pulled back into other unrelated things, instead of saying, why are they demanding my papers? Why is Joe Biden ruling by edict? Instead, once again, it falls back to, I wonder what the precedent is of vaccines. And then you see it in the media. We mandate MMR vaccines. Why are you so concerned? I'm not concerned about the mRNA vaccines. Actually, I think they're quite brilliant. When I read about the adenovirus DNA vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, I was like, wow. They did tremendous research on this stuff. Great. Government shouldn't be demanding my papers. Joe Biden shouldn't be enforcing by edict. They shouldn't be setting OSHA rules by decree. The Supreme Court should not be overruled by Joe Biden on the CD with his eviction moratorium. The legislation should not be bypassed by Biden. The governors should not be murdering people. This is the stuff that's getting washed away because the conversation keeps drifting back.
But the argument against that is sometimes a governor has to rule by decree, like Abraham Lincoln repealing habeas corpus, but for the Civil War in order to fight a war properly, suspending it, and then eventually bring it back. But suspending habeas corpus, like getting rid of human rights. And if someone believes that the virus is that dangerous as like a war, it's like a viral war that we're fighting, then they will support the authoritarian.
We recognize,
and a lot of people do, a lot of people don't.
That we recognize a great moral evil in slavery. And the good Abraham Lincoln did in fighting a war that kept the country unified and then ended slavery, contributed to the end of slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation. There's a lot of complicated politics involved in what his motives were. Ending slavery was extremely popular in the North, and there were a lot of activists fighting on that moral ground. But for a lot of people, it was wealth, loss of access to cash, and the moral issues weren't as big. Slavery was the prime component of what was driving states apart. But then, of course, there are other people who are concerned about other issues. Several states seceded not because of slavery, but because of the Battle of Fort Sumter. When they saw what was going on with the fighting, they said this union is too much for us. Virginia split in half, West Virginia and Virginia. So anyway, the point is, we recognize Abraham Lincoln, and we recognize he did bad things. We don't like the bad things he did. We like the good things he did. So when we look now, and we're watching a government like Joe Biden say, I believe, in my heart of hearts, I must do these things to you for your own good. I say, nah. Because what he's doing is more in line with Buchanan than Abraham Lincoln. He's ripping this country to shreds. He's telling people you're complicit if you don't support my economic plan. What does that have to do with the emergency decrees he's enacting on mandates? Saying that OSHA now has a rule where if your business has 100 or more employees, we are mandating by decree. That is well above and beyond anything a good president would be doing. It is ripping this country to shreds, not healing it, not fixing it, and not fighting to preserve it.
But here's the reason that I don't necessarily care that the conversation gets splintered about mandates. It keeps going back to efficacy and all this other stuff about vaccines. As far as I can tell, there are two different camps of people on this issue. There are people that are very much anti-mandate, and there are people that are pro-mandate. I don't know how to have a conversation anymore with the people that are pro-mandate. I literally don't know how to get through to them because they can justify it it doesn't matter what kind of argument you present to them. They'll say that it's more dangerous. They'll say COVID's so dangerous, we have to do that. They say, oh, well, it's going to get back to normal. We just got to wait for it to get back to normal. And then you can say, okay, well, that's why we don't take our shoes off when we go through the airport security anymore. And they say that there's no getting through to them.
But you don't need to.
We don't.
We're not trying to tell those people to come back to reality. I'm trying to tell the people who are in reality, stop sending the conversation to unrelated issues. Stop sending the conversation to medical issues over policy issues. If people want to go to the doctor, if people want to go to a parking lot for a pop-up vaccination center, I don't care. That's their business, not mine. If the government wants to rule by decree and force people to undergo medical procedures, I got a very serious problem with this. Having a debate over efficacy and things like that is distracting and pulling people towards a conversation where we accept a social credit system with exemptions. No. Freedom, decentralization, a republic, electoral college, all the good stuff the founding fathers laid forth, and then all of the amazing amendments that we've enacted. But we're being ripped to shreds. We're trying to have a conversation with those who are in reality, saying, keep the conversation on the mandates. The people who are pro-mandate will never change it. They're authoritarians. They love the mandates. They've always loved it. They celebrate Antifa burning down people's buildings. They believe whatever the authority tells them. You're not getting through to them. But if the people in reality stop focusing on the mandates, what happens? Okay, you guys win. If you have natural immunity or negative tests, we're now going to allow you to come to these stores. And then they go, we did it. We won. Mandate now permanent. No, mandate bad.
I wouldn't comply with that. If they made that rule change, I would be like, still, I'm not showing any kind of paperwork, because if I want to go to the supermarket, grocery store, bowling alley, movie theater, I'm going to do what I want without having to be checked for my medical records and my medical history. It's just absurd. And I think every element of the story deserves to be kind of talked about, considered, broken down. But I agree with you. The bigger element here is that human rights are being violated. People are getting discriminated against. People's livelihoods are being taken away from them because they're not licking the boot of big government. And that's the issue here. It does need to be addressed. And we need to stick to the core values of personal liberty, freedom, and personal responsibility for all the individuals involved here.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.